In the pouring rain of downtown New York City, Roman huddled under the bus shelter, his threadbare jacket doing little to ward off the chill that seeped into his bones. With only $5 left in his pocket, the very last of his savings meant for a hot meal, he watched as the well-dressed man beside him fumbled through his pockets, muttering curses under his breath because he had no cash for the fare. "Here," Roman said, extending the crumpled bill toward the stranger without a second thought. "Take it. I don't need it as much as you do right now." The man, tall with sharp blue eyes and a tailored coat that screamed quiet wealth, looked up in genuine surprise, his hand pausing mid-search. "You sure, kid? That's your last bit, isn't it?" Roman shrugged, forcing a tired smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, but I've gone without before. Bus is coming. Just take it." The stranger accepted the money with a nod of thanks, and they boarded together, the doors hissing shut behind them as the vehicle pulled away from the curb into the glistening streets. Roman found a seat near the back, his wet sneakers squeaking against the floor, while the man sat across from him, studying him quietly. At 26, Roman had learned the hard way that kindness was a luxury most people in his position couldn't afford, yet something about this moment felt different, like a small crack in the wall of isolation he'd built since his family in Texas had thrown him out 3 years ago for being gay. The rejection still stung every time he thought about it. His father's angry shout, his mother's silent tears, the slammed door that had sent him hitchhiking north with nothing but a backpack and a broken heart. Now, sleeping in shelters or under bridges when the beds filled up, scraping by on odd jobs that never lasted, Roman wondered how much longer he could keep pretending he was okay. The stranger leaned forward slightly as the bus rumbled through Times Square. "Name's Elias," he said, his voice smooth and steady, carrying the faint trace of a Midwest accent softened by years elsewhere. "I appreciate what you did back there. Most folks would have looked the other way." Roman glanced up, surprised by the genuine warmth in those eyes. "Roman, and it's nothing. Happens to everyone sometimes." But it wasn't nothing to him. That $5 had been his dinner, his only plan for not going to bed hungry again. Elias didn't press, but he kept the conversation light, asking about the city, the weather, anything to fill the space. By the time Roman's stop approached in Brooklyn, he felt a strange pull, like the universe had handed him a fleeting connection in a life full of dead ends. He stood to exit, nodding farewell, but Elias handed him a small card with just a phone number scribbled on it. "If you ever need anything, call. No strings." Roman pocketed it without much thought, stepping into the rain once more, the weight of another night ahead pressing on his shoulders. Little did he know that this ordinary act on a rainy Tuesday would unravel threads he never knew existed, forcing him to confront the very identity he'd fought so hard to hide and the possibilities he'd long stopped believing in. The next morning, Roman woke in the crowded shelter, the card still in his pocket like a forgotten promise. He spent the day at a day labor site, hauling boxes until his back ached, the pay just enough for a cheap sandwich and coffee. Thoughts of Elias lingered, not romantically at first, but as a reminder that someone out there had seen him. Not just the homeless guy, but a person worth a simple thank you. That evening, as he walked toward the shelter again, his phone buzzed with an unknown number. It was Elias. "Hey, Roman. Wondered if you'd like a hot meal. My treat." No pressure. Roman hesitated, pride warring with hunger and that tiny spark of curiosity. He agreed, meeting Elias at a small diner near the waterfront, where the aroma of fresh coffee and burgers wrapped around him like a hug he hadn't felt in years. Over plates of food that tasted like luxury, Elias listened as Roman cautiously shared bits of his story. The coming out that shattered his world, the move to New York chasing dreams that evaporated under the weight of survival. Elias shared little about himself, only that he traveled a lot for work and valued real kindness more than most. By the end of the night, Roman felt seen in a way that scared him, because opening up meant risking the pain of rejection all over again. Yet as he walked back to the shelter, the card now feeling heavier in his pocket, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, this stranger could be the first step toward something he hadn't dared dream of since leaving home. The days that followed blurred into a tentative rhythm Roman hadn't expected. Elias called again 2 nights later, this time suggesting they meet at a quiet park bench overlooking the Hudson, where the city lights danced on the water like distant stars. Roman arrived wary, his worn backpack slung over one shoulder, but Elias greeted him with a genuine smile and 2 steaming cups of coffee from a nearby cart. "Figured you might need this after whatever your day threw at you," Elias said, handing one over without fanfare. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easier than Roman remembered any had in years. He opened up more about the nights he'd spent questioning everything, why his love for men made him unworthy in his family's eyes, how the constant judgment from strangers on the street chipped away at his sense of self. "I keep thinking, if I just worked harder, saved enough, maybe I could prove them wrong," Roman admitted, staring at the river. Elias nodded thoughtfully, his own past hinted at through careful words. A high-pressure life where appearances mattered more than truth, where he'd learned to hide parts of himself to survive in a world that rewarded strength over vulnerability. But he never pushed, never pried too deep, and for the first time, Roman felt the knot in his chest loosen just a fraction. Their meetings became a lifeline, coffee here, a walk there, always Elias covering the small costs without making it feel like charity. Roman's pride flared at first. He'd survived on his own this long, after all. But hunger and exhaustion wore him down, and Elias's quiet respect made refusal feel pointless. One afternoon, after Roman lost a temp job to a scheduling mix-up, Elias showed up at the shelter with a duffel bag. "Found a place you could crash for a bit. Friend of mine has an empty studio. Rent-free until you get on your feet." Roman stared at the keys, his mind racing through every possible catch. "Why are you doing this? You don't even know me." Elias met his gaze steadily. "Because someone once did the same for me when I needed it most. And because your kindness that day on the bus reminded me what matters." The studio was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that let in morning light. Roman moved in that night, the weight of the streets lifting slightly as he lay there, staring at the ceiling. Yet sleep didn't come easy. Doubts crept in like shadows. What if this was pity? What if Elias expected something in return? The next week brought small victories. Roman landed a part-time gig at a coffee shop, his first steady paycheck in months. He insisted on paying Elias back in tiny installments, which Elias accepted with a laugh that warmed Roman more than he cared to admit. Their friendship deepened during evening walks, where Roman shared his dreams of studying graphic design if he could ever afford classes, and Elias spoke vaguely of his own work in tech, how it demanded everything but gave little room for the personal. One night, as rain pattered against the studio window again, Roman felt the pull of something more than gratitude. Elias's steady presence, the way he listened without judgment, stirred feelings Roman had buried deep after his last relationship ended in heartbreak back in Texas. But admitting that, even to himself, meant facing the fear that his sexuality had already cost him everything once. Family, home, stability. He pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the practical. Saving for a deposit on his own place, rebuilding slowly. Elias seemed to sense the shift, keeping boundaries clear. Yet his eyes held a quiet intensity that made Roman's heart race in unguarded moments. The misunderstanding came subtly at first. A friend from the shelter, Jake, spotted them together and pulled Roman aside later. "That guy's loaded, man. You sure he's not just playing savior? Guys like that don't stick around for people like us." Roman brushed it off, but the seed of doubt planted itself. Was this all an illusion? Another way the world reminded him he didn't belong? Still, when Elias invited him to a low-key art exhibit downtown the following weekend, Roman said yes, telling himself it was just friendship, nothing more. As they wandered the galleries, surrounded by vibrant canvases that mirrored the chaos in his own mind, Roman felt a spark of hope ignite. Perhaps this connection could help him heal the fractures inside, one careful step at a time. The art exhibit lingered in Roman's thoughts long after they left, the colors and forms echoing his own unspoken yearnings for a life beyond survival. Elias had pointed out pieces that spoke of reinvention, of shadows turning to light, and Roman had felt seen in those brushstrokes more than in any conversation. Back at the studio, he sketched late into the night for the first time in months, his hands remembering the joy of creation he'd abandoned after his family's rejection. Elias's support felt like fuel, not charity now. He even suggested a community college program nearby with scholarships Roman might qualify for. "You've got talent. Don't let the past steal that too," Elias said during one of their coffee meetups, his tone encouraging without pressure. Roman applied that week, the application process stirring a mix of excitement and terror. What if he failed again? The prejudice he'd faced since arriving in New York resurfaced sharply one evening at the coffee shop job. A customer, overhearing Roman mention his friend Elias to a coworker, sneered under his breath about people like that taking advantage of the system. Roman's cheeks burned, the old shame rising hot and familiar, reminding him how his identity had painted him as lesser in so many eyes. He clocked out early that night, walking the streets until exhaustion numbed the sting. Elias met him afterward, sensing something off without Roman saying a word. They sat on the studio steps, the city humming around them, and Roman finally voiced the fear that had haunted him since Texas. "Being gay cost me my family. What if it costs me this too? This chance, whatever it is." Elias listened, then shared a piece of his own hidden truth. The world he'd built demanded perfection, where any crack in the facade could topple empires. "I've hidden parts of myself for years to keep what I have. But meeting you showed me maybe that's no way to live." The words hung between them, a bridge forming over the chasm of their different worlds. Their bond shifted subtly after that, laced with a tenderness neither named yet. Walks turned longer, conversations deeper, hands brushing accidentally and lingering just a second too long. Roman felt the internal storm building, joy at the possibility of love, terror at the vulnerability it required. A misunderstanding erupted when Jake from the shelter showed up unannounced, drunk and bitter, accusing Roman of ditching his old life for a rich sugar daddy. Words flew, old loyalties clashing with new hopes, and Roman defended Elias fiercely. But the encounter left him rattled, questioning if his growing feelings were real or just escape. Elias arrived later, calm as always, helping Roman process the hurt without defensiveness. "People project their own pain. Doesn't define us." That night, as they shared a simple meal in the studio, Roman realized how much he'd come to rely on Elias. Not for money, but for the steady anchor in his chaotic sea of self-doubt. Yet the pressure mounted. His family back home sent a rare email through a cousin, demanding he come to his senses or stay gone forever. The words reopened wounds, sending Roman into a spiral of isolation. He avoided Elias for 2 days, pacing the studio, weighing the cost of letting anyone close again. When Elias showed up with takeout and no questions, simply sitting beside him in silence until Roman spoke, the walls cracked further. "I don't want to drag you into my mess," Roman whispered. Elias's response was soft but firm. "Your mess is where I found something real for the first time in years." The admission hung heavy, pushing Roman toward a choice: retreat into the safety of loneliness or step forward into the unknown of trust. As autumn leaves fell outside, their connection deepened into quiet moments of shared laughter and understanding. But the external world, society's stares, family echoes, personal fears, loomed larger, testing whether this fragile hope could withstand the coming storms. Winter arrived with biting winds that mirrored the chill creeping into Roman's heart as doubts resurfaced stronger than before. The community college acceptance letter brought a rush of pride, but tuition loomed even with aid, forcing him to pick up extra shifts that left little time for sketching or Elias. Their meetings grew strained, stolen hours filled with Roman's exhaustion and Elias's quiet concern. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Roman snapped when Elias offered to cover a class fee. "I don't want your handouts forever. I'm not some project you fix and forget." The words escaped before he could stop them, born of years of feeling lesser, and Elias's face tightened, not with anger but with a pain Roman hadn't seen. "That's not what this is, Roman. Never was." The misunderstanding festered overnight, Roman replayed it in his mind, convinced his outburst had ruined everything. He avoided calls, throwing himself into work until his body protested with aches that matched the one in his chest. Meanwhile, Elias dealt with his own pressures. Late-night messages hinted at boardroom battles and a life where his wealth isolated him as much as Roman's poverty did. A betrayal hit when Jake, seeking revenge for perceived slights, spread rumors at the shelter about Roman selling out for a rich man, turning old acquaintances cold and judgmental. The whispers followed Roman everywhere, amplifying his identity crisis. Was loving another man always going to invite this scorn? He confronted Jake in a heated argument that ended with fists clenched but no blows, leaving Roman drained and questioning every choice since that rainy bus stop. Elias tracked him down at the studio that night, refusing to leave until they talked. "I didn't come from nothing, Roman. My world's built on secrets too. But with you, I don't want to hide." He revealed fragments of his truth then, the tech empire he'd built from a garage idea, the loneliness of boardrooms where vulnerability meant weakness, the way he'd wandered that day without cash on purpose, testing if the world still held kindness. Roman listened, stunned, the Billionaire label clicking into place like a puzzle piece that explained the effortless support but didn't diminish the man. Yet the revelation brought new conflict. How could someone like Elias truly understand the grind of homelessness, the daily erasure of being gay and broke? Roman pulled away again, sacrificing their closeness to protect himself from inevitable disappointment. Family pressure escalated with a call from his mother, voice trembling as she begged him to return home normal, dangling forgiveness like a lifeline he knew came with chains. The conversation left him shattered, pacing the studio until dawn, the weight of heritage and desire colliding. Elias waited patiently, sending no demands, only a single message. "When you're ready, I'm here." No expectations. The crisis peaked during a snowstorm when Roman, jobless again after a boss overheard the rumors and let him go, found himself at the shelter door once more. Pride broken, he dialed Elias, voice cracking. "I messed up. I thought I could do this alone." Elias arrived within the hour, coat dusted with snow, and without a word pulled Roman into a hug that spoke volumes. In that moment, amid the misunderstanding and external forces, Roman faced the choice. Continue fighting his identity alone or let this connection be the bridge to growth. The decision hung unresolved as they sat through the night talking, tensions rising toward a breaking point that would either shatter them or forge something unbreakable. The snow melted into a tentative spring, mirroring the thaw in Roman's guarded heart, as he and Elias rebuilt after the storm of doubts. They spent quiet evenings in the studio, Roman sketching designs inspired by their talks, while Elias shared stories of his early struggles before wealth insulated him. The revelation of Elias's billionaire status no longer loomed as a barrier but as context. His empire in sustainable tech demanded constant travel and discretion, explaining the initial disguise on that bus. Yet Roman grappled with his place in it all, the internal crisis peaking during a weekend trip Elias suggested to a cabin upstate for fresh air. There, surrounded by woods and silence, Roman confronted the sacrifice he'd made, pushing away potential love to avoid repeating family pain. "What if I can't be what you need? Someone who fits in your world?" he asked one evening by the fire. Elias's answer came steady, eyes reflecting the flames. "You already are. The rest is just details we figure out together." But external forces tested that resolve. A tabloid leak, fueled perhaps by a disgruntled business associate, hinted at Elias's personal life, dragging Roman into the spotlight indirectly through blurry photos of their park walks. The scrutiny amplified societal prejudice. Online comments tore at Roman's identity, calling him opportunist or worse, while his family emailed again, this time with ultimatums tied to public shame. The pressure forced a breaking point. Roman, overwhelmed, packed a bag and left the studio one night, leaving a note about needing space to sort his head. The sacrifice felt necessary, protecting Elias from his mess, even if it tore him apart inside. Days turned to a week of isolation in a cheap motel, Roman reflecting on every decision since that bus fare. He realized the growth demanded wasn't just surviving but choosing trust despite the risks. Elias respected the distance at first, but worry mounted until he appeared at the motel door, not with offers of money but with honesty. I hid who I was for years too. Cost me real connections. Don't let fear do the same to us. Their reunion brought raw conversations about betrayal, not from each other, but from the world that shaped them. Roman admitted his running was fear of unworthiness. Elias confessed the loneliness of his empire. Together, they faced a family confrontation when Roman's father showed up in New York unannounced, demanding a meeting that exposed old wounds but also cracks in the parental armor. His mother's quiet support shining through. The encounter ended without resolution but with Roman standing firmer in his truth. As spring bloomed, Roman returned to the studio, enrolling fully in classes and landing a freelance design gig through Elias's subtle network, though he insisted on earning it. The separation had clarified what mattered. Not erasing the past but building despite it. Yet one final test loomed when Elias's board pushed for a major deal requiring him to attend a high society gala, inviting Roman as his date publicly for the first time. The choice weighed heavy, step into the light or retreat, but Roman's growth shone as he agreed, heart pounding with the knowledge that this step meant embracing all parts of himself. The gala lights glittered like stars against the Manhattan skyline, a world Roman had only glimpsed from sidewalks before. Dressed in a simple suit Elias had helped choose, not gifted but earned through his new freelance work. He stood beside Elias at the entrance, hand brushing his in quiet solidarity. The evening unfolded with conversations that tested Roman's resolve. Investors probed subtly about their connection, societal stares lingered, but Elias's steady presence anchored him. When a bold guest questioned their relationship outright, Roman answered calmly, "It's real, and that's enough for us." The words marked his awakening. Identity no longer a burden but a strength forged through every hardship. Back at the studio later, under soft lamplight, Elias turned to him with eyes full of quiet triumph. "You didn't just survive tonight. You owned it." Their embrace that followed carried the weight of months. The bus fare that started it, the misunderstandings that nearly ended it, the sacrifices that proved their bond. Roman had grown from the broken young man on the streets to someone who chose love actively, while Elias learned humility and openness in a life once ruled by secrecy. They traveled briefly after, exploring small towns upstate where Roman sketched landscapes and Elias disconnected from emails, their conversations weaving friendship, family reflections, and future plans into a tapestry of mutual support. Roman reconnected tentatively with his mother via calls, setting boundaries that honored his truth without erasing hers, while Elias restructured parts of his company to reflect values shaped by Roman's resilience. The high point came on a sunny afternoon in Central Park, where they'd first walked together, Elias pulling Roman close under blooming trees, whispering promises of a shared home, a life built side by side. No grand gestures, just the simple joy of two men who had chosen each other despite everything. Roman's journey had taught him that growth wasn't erasing scars but letting them light the way forward, and in Elias's arms, the world felt possible again. As they watched the city pulse around them, hand in hand, the unexpected path from that rainy bus stop had led to a love that redefined family, friendship, and self for both. True or false? Can an act of kindness from someone society discards truly lead to lasting love and redemption?